Do you want to ask if anybody else has one? In the crowd? Yes, no? Yes? If anybody here has a laptop, we shorter one. I want to welcome everybody to the 16th annual meeting of the Coalition on Political Assassinations here in Dallas. This is our 16th regional meeting. We started these in 1994 when COPA was formed. And COPA is a national organization and coalition of the people that do research into the various political assassinations. We're made up of medical, forensic, and ballistic experts, authors, and academicians, and individual researchers who work on these cases. We focus on the John F. Kennedy case, but also Robert Kennedy assassination, Martin Luther King assassination, Malcolm X, and other political assassinations. And we were responsible for the passage of the John F. Kennedy Records Act, Assassination Records Act, and it's to date released over 6.5 million pages of classified documents. And we tracked the release with the Assassination Record Review Board while it was in existence. And we've continued to follow the best evidence in these cases, and we try to present the best new evidence each year. And people, if you didn't get it, there's a blue sheet outside that has our schedule for the weekend. But we're going to be here through Monday doing different things. And we're meeting tonight here at the Adolphus first. Then we're going to have a movie night at the Hotel Lawrence over near Jackson and Houston Street. Starts in about 10 o'clock after we finish here. There's shuttle service back to the hotel. And tomorrow, starting around 9 o'clock, we're going to be at the central jury room of the George Allen building, which is across Jackson from the Hotel Lawrence. And we'll be there till about 5. Then we'll have speakers again at 7 in the Hotel Lawrence, and a second movie night. And then Sunday morning we'll do some additional speakers and wrap up, going from about 9 till 1 at the Hotel Lawrence. So the meeting's there in the second floor rear, in the Haynes room. We're on Sunday after the meeting hoping to pool drivers, and people could get in touch with me if they're interested in being a driver and taking some people with them. We're going to try to do a carpool road trip to the Pogue Political Library at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, where there's an extensive collection of materials from the JFK researchers, Penn Jones's work, and other people are starting to put their materials there. I wanted to say thanks to John Garrity, who did a lot of the advanced work for this, Randy Benson, who's videotaping it, Carl Chatsky, who's helping with the technical support, and Joe Green, T. Carter, who's a longtime associate and on what remains of the board of COPA, my new friend Marilyn Tenenoff, who's been helping out. A special thanks to Tom Blackwell, who intervened with the Dallas court system and got us back after 5 years of being denied into the George Allen building. And so we're able to meet there again. It's a nice, large meeting room. Robert Groden, who always helps out every year. Frank Caplet also helps promote it. Mike Nurko comes and helps with the registration. Russell Willingham every year helps us with AVR, the video equipment. Andy Winarczyk and Gerald Blow, associated with Last Hurrah Books, do a resource room that'll be at the other side of the hall at the back of the Lawrence. And Tom Lyons and Pete Johnson and other donors that have supported us during the year. Our Dallas support people, like Peggy Davidson, who gives rides to people locally here and helps us out. Wanted to thank Malcolm Blunt for some assistance at the beginning of the conference, and everybody who came this year for coming. There are people here from England, from across the United States, and we have some sort of special guests that are attending different things, have been at some of the meals we've had. Roger Craig's nephew is here, the Dallas police officer that was vilified for telling the truth about what happened November 22nd. Penn Jones's son Mike is supposed to be on Sunday. So we've got a great lineup of speakers, I think, and some are coming in remote, but we'll be able to ask them live question and answers even when they're on the remote. We have a an online webcast going on, and we're trying to live cast this out to it, and all our remote speakers will appear at www.politicalassassinations.com, which is our main website, and the Ustream feed is up there, and a schedule is up there, so people are watching this around the country also on our website. We have a YouTube page, we have a Facebook page, and we do social networking to build it. We ran a 21,000 person e-blast in the events calendar for the Dallas Observer to try to get some local Dallas people interested. And at least one of the speakers will be posting an article afterwards, Peter Dell Scott, about the thesis that he's working on that will be more extensive than the comments that he'll make, and there may be other things we'll post after the conference at the site. And we often archive specific speakers, films of speakers on the site after the conference. And the videotapes that we're making, Ralph Coles is here. He comes every year and helps us out. And Randy's taping, so we will have DVDs available of the full conference. And normally what we do is people that send us donations of $50 or more, we send them a DVD, and thanks for doing that. This year, COPA also held an event in New York City on February 21st, which was an anniversary of the Malcolm X assassination. And 2 years prior to that, we had done it at the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Museum, but this year we had to rent a separate location at a church there, and we had an eyewitness to the shooting who had identified one of the gunmen. We'll talk about him later. And we've been continuing our lobbying efforts to get the Martin Luther King Records Act passed to release all the files on the life and death of Dr. King. And we came very close to getting it passed. Both John Kerry on the Senate side and John Lewis on the House side said they were going to introduce it, and then it's been backed off since then, but we're working through the appropriate committees, and all the chairs of the committees that would look at it are in favor of it, but it just hasn't dropped yet. When it drops, we'll let everyone know in the COPA network so that you can get your Congress member to sign on, or senator to sign on to the bill and help to move it. But we're continuing to do that, and we've been trying to get that passed for the last, I guess, 3 sessions of Congress, at least, but it's coming very close to fruition now. We're also been instrumental in tracking the National Declassification Center, which is a new center that's set up to declassify every document 25 years or older that's classified. Doesn't have enough people to do it. They wanted priorities. We said make the priority public interest. What shows public interest is there's been a congressional investigation, so we're talking about the House Select Committee, Watergate, Contragate, and do those first. And we're pushing them in that direction. And I was also able this year, I kept telling my friends that I wanted to go to the beach this summer. I ended up at the beach at the Arctic Ocean in Barrow, Alaska. Some friends brought me up, and I did a talk at Barrow about all the different declassification things that have gone beyond Freedom of Information Act at this point. Because they're scientists and they want to know about getting documents loose, so I did a whole slide presentation up there. I don't want to go on too long because I want to get Walt on. I have some comments at the end. But I think we have to dismiss this notion that these assassinations are unsolvable, or that the historical reality is unknowable, or that they will remain a mystery forever. And I think by actively unearthing our history and doing research and investigation, we know a great deal about these assassinations and what and who was behind them. Mark Rabinowitz, who writes Oil Empire Site, has a sequence that he uses to deconstruct, going from the official story to an official fallback story to a limited hangout of information, and then to the best evidence that can be compiled, and then to the disinformation that follows and false stories that are put out as a sequence that a lot of these things follow in terms of how they come out. Black Ops Radio is going to do a conference in Hawaii, I believe, in April. We are planning now already for a major 50th anniversary conference in 2013 here in Dallas. That will also be the 45th anniversary for Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy assassination, so we're doing regional meetings in Memphis and Los Angeles. And we're also going to be working on a book compilation of the best evidence of what we know in the last 50 years. And we're going to be working on a video documentary. John Garrity's been part of this, a 5-part that we would put out on YouTube and try to get some viral attention for it before the 5th anniversary. Jim Douglas, who keynoted for us last year, is continuing his work. He did an amazing book called JFK and the Unspeakable. He's writing a book now on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X's assassination. He'll also be doing a third volume on Robert Kennedy's assassination, so there's more to come from that source. On the other hand, Tom Hanks is scheduled to work on an HBO special based on Vincent Bugliosi's very thick but ridiculous book. We're going to try to see if we can get through to Hanks and disavow this idea, disabuse him of the idea that he should be doing that. We've worked toward a grand jury. A few years ago, Vincent Bugliosi called me when he was working on the book, and he wanted to know about the history of COPA. And he started out saying, "John Judge, this is Vince Bugliosi. You probably don't know me." He said, and you may not agree with me because I think that Oswald acted alone. I said, "No, Mr. Bugliosi, I know exactly who you are, and I also think Oswald acted alone. We all do. I just don't think he shot the president." And even he had to admit he hadn't gotten that one before. There's congressional and court actions coming up on the Robert Kennedy case that we'll be watching closely, and also a congressional investigation by Dennis Kucinich on the Kent State shootings. That's going to reveal more. An agent of the government there who shot off a gun that led in part to the National Guard response. So things are coming out. Our first keynote speaker tonight, we have two, is Walt Brown. For those of you who don't know Walt Brown, he's the author of a new master analytic chronology on the death of President Kennedy. That's thousands of pages long, and it reports data from a handful of historical events prior even to the birth of John F. Kennedy. And it was 2.5 years in the making, 5,800 pages. As of last year, I think it's longer now, 50,000 paragraphs and 2.2 million words. And Walt Brown has a PhD in history from the University of Notre Dame. He teaches at Ramapo College in New Jersey. He's a former special agent of the Justice Department. He's a longtime researcher into the Warren Commission and the assassination of John F. Kennedy. He's the editor of JFK Deep Politics magazine, and he's the author of several books on the subject, including People versus Lee Harvey Oswald, Treachery in Dallas, a referenced index guide to the Warren Commission, which is also exhaustive, JFK Assassination quiz book, and a book called The Warren Mission. He also is probably the most ambitious previous worker into a global index to the JFK assassination, a CD-ROM that has 2,400 pages, which index not just the Warren Commission, but also the House Select Committee on assassination volumes, and more than 100 of the best-known JFK books. So there's, in that collection, 17,185 names and over 4 million references that are cross-referenced by 175 categories. So I think he knows something about the assassination, and we're hoping he'll tell us something tonight. And are we ready for a feed on him, or is there more to go?
Where's Joe?
Has he logged in?
Joe Green.
Are we ready? No, I can keep going. A few minutes? Speak loud. 2-3 minutes, okay. I'll go a little bit into some of the themes I wanted to touch on and start with some readings that I brought along for this event. And maybe what I'll do is, before I do that, is I'll go ahead and give the Sylvia Marr Award, because we present to researchers a Lifetime Achievement Award sometimes from COPA, and we prepared to do a Sylvia Marr as an early researcher who wrote a book on the assassination that broke down the Warren Commission very early called Accessories After the Fact. She did an index of the Warren Commission, and we've named this after her. It's a Lifetime Achievement Award, and this year we're presenting it to Eugene Lawrence Case. And this is really to give praise and acknowledgement to someone who is sadly no longer among us, but whose life was committed to justice and exposing government lies and harmful practices, using the brilliance and creativity of advertisements to promote truth and justice. Gene Case died suddenly of a heart attack this September, and it's a great loss to all of us. He was a friend, a supporter, an advocate of our Coalition on Political Assassinations and to the efforts to reopen the John F. Kennedy case for many years. He was part of the creative ad team that took its cues from Lyndon Johnson's 5 O'Clock Club of campaign advisors, and he was responsible for the airing of the controversial television ad, you might remember, that showed a young girl picking daisy petals as a voice counts down toward the explosion of a nuclear bomb against Goldwater. It was designed to defeat Barry Goldwater in the presidential race of 1964. In 2001, he left a lucrative position with the $500 million ad agency Jordan McGrath, Case and Partners, which he founded in New York City, to form Avenging Angels, Inc., a creative advertising company that would promote progressive political causes without pulling any punches. Gene had a very developed sense of irony and humor. He had a passionate hatred of falsehood and corruption in government. His fascination with the Kennedy assassination began decades ago during his first marriage. He attended early COPA annual conferences in Washington, D.C. He created a small ad for COPA that was printed in the Dallas Observer in 2002, the year right after 9/11. This is a little picture of it, but it was in the Dallas Observer, about an eighth of a page ad, and it pointed to November 2nd, 1963, and an iconic photo of LBJ being sworn in on Air Force One. What it reads as, it's a picture where the aide is winking at him, Jackie's crying, and Johnson has his hand up, Sarah, who's the judge, is swearing him in, and the topic title with an exclamation point is, "Talk about regime change." This is when we were about to go into Iraq. His new firm, Avenging Angels, where I had the privilege to work for him briefly, took on creation of the covers of The Nation magazine, and through his contacts there, he did lobby for the magazine to print current and compelling evidence about the Kennedy assassination conspiracy instead of the dismissive diatribes of Max Holland, Alexander Coburn, and the other contributors who tried to silence the critics. And he was able to arrange a meeting of several of our COPA board members with the editor, Katrina Van Hubel, but to little avail. She brought Max Holland in to counter and wouldn't listen to the people. Gene also attended the Lost River Conference in West Virginia some years ago, hosted by John Newman, a small gathering of researchers to examine what we could agree on about the Kennedy case. In the last session, Gene asked, "Is this just a hobby for you guys, or do you want to do something about it?" And I told him I wanted to create a museum of hidden history in Washington, D.C. to tell the real story of the political assassinations, covert operations, and other secrets of the rise of the national security state to millions of tourists and students who visit there annually. He liked the idea. He had me explore funding and locations when I worked for him. He even penciled out a rough budget for a first year costs that was close to $4 million at the time. I'm still working to bring that dream to fruition in D.C. and working with interns and researchers who are helping out. And Gene knew that the government lied about John F. Kennedy assassination, and he wanted to do something about it. Gene's second wife, Sylvia Rodriguez, invited me to his memorial service in New York City this last month at the historic Lincoln Center, where his firm helped to advertise major Broadway plays with fresh and clever artwork. And I met one of his sons, one of whose high school projects was watching his father and a friend shoot an old Mannlicher Carcano rifle at Mellon's to replicate the headshot responses of JFK. She plans to donate his research library and the rifle to the museum. Gene was working on a website and a project related to the upcoming 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination with the theme of ending the denials and getting to the truth. His wife and one of his creative artists are donating the use of the central design for that project for our 50th anniversary conference and plans. It's a picture of the Kennedy $50 with the head in profile with a bullet hole through the coin with blood coming out, and it says 50 years of denial is enough. And we're honored, as I was honored to know Gene Case, and as I said at the memorial in New York, Gene was awake, as so few in each generation are, and he yearned for the truth to be known and told about the murder of John F. Kennedy and what it means to our country. I remember talking to him right after 9/11, and he said, "Now I know what a paradigm shift is." The death of President Kennedy was no less of a paradigm shift for him, and it put him on a path that paralleled the one so many of us have traveled despite its difficulties. I encourage you to get to know Gene Case's work by visiting his website for Avenging Angels, Inc. And I hope that COPA can continue his work and his desire to finally get closure on these assassinations and what they mean. His humor, his brilliance, and humanity will surely be sorely missed by those who knew him. I had looked forward to working with him directly on the museum, and now his name and legacy will doubtless be part of that. Coalition on Political Assassinations is proud to be able to honor him, sadly posthumously, for his contributions to our search and his for the truth. I'll show you the plaque that we're sending on to Sylvia. It reads, "The Coalition on Political Assassinations presents the Sylvia Moore Lifetime Achievement Award 2010 in memory of Eugene Lawrence Case, in recognition of one who always sought the truth." From a bio, I had this quote, which was quite interesting to me. Eugene Lawrence Case, this was in the obituary in the New York Times, was born on December 6, 1937 in Knoxville, Tennessee, where his father, Harry, was the personnel director of the Tennessee Valley Authority, the New Deal program under President Franklin Roosevelt. Like his father, Mr. Case graduated from Cornell, where he studied architecture. He took his first copywriter job in 1961 at the J. Walter Thompson Agency. That's September 13, 2010. Tennessee Valley Authority was the source of the creation of the Defense Industrial Security Command, named in the Torbett document as one of the agencies involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The J. Walter Thompson Agency was an ad agency that did ad work for many corrupt corporations, but also for Pinochet in Chile and the dictatorship there. So Gene was at the edge of many of the things that I'm sure he unearthed and opposed during his life. How are we for Walt? Ready to go? Is up? Oh.
Okay, it's the guy from New Jersey, take two. Good evening, welcome. I certainly want to thank everybody in the audience this evening, present or electronically, because the reason you're there is the most important thing for me, and hopefully we keep getting together at least once a year. We'll get closer each year. I know what I'm doing is getting closer. I certainly want to thank John Judge and his staff for understanding the predicament that I found myself in for the last couple of months that prevented me from being there in person. I'll get to that shortly. But John and I go back a long way, and I'm going to say it was about 15 years ago. He sent me 1,300 pages of faxes one summer for a COPA program, and I thought the fax machine was just going to burn out. And then one day I got 1,301 pages of faxes all the same day from Colonel Dan Marvin, and I'm sure John will remember that. And if he wants to tell you about it, fine. If not, you're not missing anything, believe me. So welcome to everybody, and thank you. Again, my apologies that I can't be there in person, but like I said, the last couple months have been very difficult. I do want to extend one acknowledgement anonymously, because I spoke to an individual whom I believe is in the audience tonight, and we came to an understanding that we'd get together tonight in Texas and have a nice dinner, hang out, get caught up on things. And I told the person, notice I'm trying to be non-gender specific, that I had extremely serious veterinary bills this summer, as well as legal costs for a divorce attorney. And the person said, well, I can help you out if it'll get you here. And I said, well, let's see what we can do, what I can do. And before I knew it, the financial aid came in the mail, and I said, okay, now I can go for sure. And then things tumbled again in the last couple of weeks, and even with the financial aid, I couldn't go. So I said to the individual, I said, if you don't mind, I'll use your hopeful stipend to get a computer with a little gizmo on it so I can at least speak to everybody. And the answer was, hey, don't worry about it. You know, it's for the cause. And I want to thank that person deeply. Had this week not been a week that there's been no sleep, I would have thanked the person by letter, and I will anyhow, but I just haven't been able to do it. So that's the first set of business. The situation that has been the problem is last year I told you about how I was learning Russian with the Russian wife, the Princess Anastasia, and we finished up, I believe, a divorce this week. But if you've ever been there, you have a pretty good idea what I went through. And it seemed to start innocently enough. I taught her how to drive the Mustang that I use day in, day out. And she told me that she would be afraid to drive the Corvette. Apparently she was in a very bad accident as a passenger. She said, I don't want to drive your Corvette ever. I said, well, that's okay, because I don't want you to either. And then in the process of learning English, she said one day, she said, I want something that will go from 0 to 175 in 3 seconds. So I bought her a bathroom scale. Didn't go over well. So and from there, things just got worse and worse. And I believe she's back in Russia now. I don't know, but I believe she is. I had to pack her thing this week for her, and it was like a death. It was really like a death, because you're taking something down off of any one of 268 coat hangers, and you remember the item and say, gosh, I remember how beautiful she looked when she was wearing that. But all I'm doing is tossing it in the suitcase. So 2010 has really been a year in which I lost my dog and I got a divorce. I'm really going to miss that dog. Anyhow, before I get to the topic I want to speak to you about tonight, which is really a historical overview of things, I want to do a commercial for the chronology that I'm still working on. When I spoke on this machine last year, I was on up to about page 7,500, 8,000. It's now 14,000 pages long. And at the risk of sounding immodest, there's a lot of good stuff in it. And you get a much better view of what happened when you see all the ducks lined up in a row. Not just all the CIA bad guys in one place or all the Mafia bad guys in one place. You see them all lined up in chronological order of what happened. It's eye-opening. I mean, there's not a day I can't wait to get to it first thing in the morning, because I know it's going to be a good day. It starts in 1823 with the birth of the first Kennedy that came to the United States, who, coincidentally, died on November 22nd in 1858. His grandson was Joseph P. Kennedy, and his great-grandson was President Kennedy. And it starts there, and 14,000 pages later, 2 weeks ago, Ted Sorensen died. So it comes right up to date, except for today. And today I got an email, I haven't had a chance to read yet, but the title was, and I don't know if any of you saw this, the title was Leonardo DiCaprio is going to get to the bottom of the JFK assassination. And just from seeing the title, I thought to myself, the last time he got to the bottom of anything, 1,500 people went with him, and the water was very cold. So I don't have a lot of hope for that one. You know, if he and Tom Hanks are going to duke it out, that's fine too. So it's been a lot of fun doing. Everything that's in there, every bit of data is footnoted and sourced thoroughly. It's all cross-referenced as well. And that's the biggest challenge in doing anything like this, because every time a new piece of data goes in, maybe it's all new. Maybe it corroborates something 100 pages away. Maybe it contradicts something 200 pages away. And in order to get it right, I got to be carrying that stuff around. And I'm at the why did I walk into this room syndrome, because the stuff that's in there is all chronology. And as I said, it's 14,000 pages now. About a third to 40% of it is analysis. And while I have high hopes for the data content of what's in there, I'm extremely proud of the analysis. And if you've ever read any of my stuff, you'd only have to read 10 pages of this gadget and you know who did it. I mean, it's my stuff. And I've even been accused of resorting to sarcasm. And I don't know if that's true or not, but you be the judge. It will be done 3 years from now, at which time it'll be somewhere 25, 30,000 pages out of it. And it's CD-ROM, and I've had people tell me that even though you have to scroll down to keep reading, they've read 500 pages in a night. But I think to myself, well, it's 30,000 pages, it still takes you 2 months. But to me, it's worth it. And I want to make it understood, particularly if there's any younger people in the audience tonight. There will be a unique kind of copyright attached to it. But when I finish it in 3 years, if somebody wants to take it on and keep adding to it, going through the archives, getting RIF numbers, new documents, whatever they find, do it. You know, it will cease to be my product 3 years from now. It's our product, and I hope people will work on it for another, 5 decades. Another, till 2063. That's the hope. And when it's done, I'm also going to hopefully speak at COPA in 2013 on the 50th and elicit donations so that I can get this thing into every library in North America, so that American people, the world, everybody will know that there was once a race of people who cared, because that's to me who we are. And I'm going to leave the chronology for a moment with a couple anecdotes. I was recently going through CIA depositions, and the amazing thing in all of this stuff, you know they're lying. That goes without saying, they're not saying. They'd be out of their element if they told the truth. But there are so many places where you read, to the best of my knowledge, or as I recall, and it becomes almost an inbred habit, genetic disposition. And you can walk away from the thing and take a break and imagine Richard Helms going home at 9 o'clock at night from work, wife's worked all day to make a fancy dinner, and he sits down, Wolf sits down, goes and sits in his easy chair, reads the paper, and she says, well, so dear, how was dinner tonight? And he says to her, to the best of my knowledge, it was pretty good. And then he checks his mail and he gets an email from one of his old buddies from 25 years before, and the email says, hey, Rich, do you remember your bachelor party when we locked it for 2 days in that hotel room with the 19-year-old triplets? And he answers, as I recall, it's amazing. It's amazing when you see all of it. This is mind-boggling. Okay, end of commercial. What I want to talk about tonight is what I'm calling now the second perspective. And it's basically a different way of presenting our concerns, and in doing so in such a way that we can reach out and make those concerns more universal than just us. Because at least in my opinion, the rush to judgment generation, the the arguments that you could make to a friend about Lee Bowers and Gene Hill and Wesley Frazier and Gordon Arnold, 99.9% of the American people have no idea who they are. And if you tell them, well, you know, people heard shots from the grassy knoll. It doesn't have, poor choice of words, the impact that it had in 1966, 1965, 1970. It's just very difficult to make a convert to the conspiracy notion, or the let's have the whole story. Just give us all the documents. Whatever they say is what it says. We're still waiting for that. But you can't. You're not going to sell it on, like I said, on Lee Bowers and Gene Hill and the rest of those folks. Particularly given the disposition of today's average American. You know, the average American in 1965 was a different person today. You know, that was Donna Reed era. Daddy put on the tie and went to work. Mom stayed home, was a good housekeeper, and took care of the little one, Beaver, whoever. It's different now. We're seeing disappearance of the middle class. People don't have time to worry about what happened to President Kennedy. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and when they get that paycheck, they're hoping they get another one. It's a very difficult time. And the other thing is, the other bookend is the constant, unrelenting fear of terrorism, which they don't leave you alone with. And I know, and now, of course, terrorism replaced the dangers of fascism and Nazism and communism. And it's a whole lot tougher to identify terrorism. So, who are they? Well, we gotta keep looking. And if you go to an airport, we're gonna strip search you and then run your body through a machine. Because you might have a bomb in your shoes or your underwear. As a 63-year-old person, the last thing I worry about is a bomb in my underwear. Foreclosures. And I live in a beautiful town. There's a lot of houses for sale in that town. And the other thing, the street I live on, and it's entirely possible somebody in the audience tonight has come by for a visit at one time or other. It's the quietest street in the world, even though it's only 20 miles from Midtown Manhattan. The time was on September 10th, 2001, which was my birthday. You could put a chair out in the middle of the street and read all day with a lemonade. Now it's a highway, because one block over there's an elementary school. Every parent in the town will visit their children to the elementary school to make sure that the terrorists in Hillsdale, New Jersey don't grab up their children on the way to Meadowbrook School. It's just ridiculous. So the traffic at the school diverts all of the traffic up the street, the formerly quiet street that I lived on. And as the traffic is going by in the morning, it's like the terrorist highway. There it is. There's nothing you can do about it. The second perspective essentially tries to put the Kennedy assassination make it one of many events in a long chain of unexplained and unpleasant events, but not necessarily all conspiracies or all, the kind of stuff that positive makes us look bad about. It's history. And history has not been kind to the truth. And that's the tragedy. As a historian, I know there's going to come a time when truth is going to come out about a lot of things. Some of the things I'm going to reference in the next few minutes, originally was one story, and now it's another story. Because the truth has become history. Or history has become the truth, take your pick. And of course, The media reports what the government says. When I'm out of the country, I watch the BBC International News, and it's like the newspapers that I read when I get home from the visit are so totally different from what I heard on the news. I was outside the U.S. late 2007. The world was talking about the recession in America, and we didn't have one yet. The media jumps to the government's tune, and they do it for a reason. And New York reason is business. And they report what the government says. And you want proof? How many times is a major newspaper headline or a news service headline debunked by the government? Almost never. Almost never. The last time I remember it happening was, I'm going to say, in late 2006 or early 2007. And there was a report on the radio, and I was typing on the chronology when I heard it. There was a report on the radio saying that the current estimate of wounded in Iraq, the count of wounded, was 51,000, and it had been revised by the government to 20,000. That means 30,000 people that had either shrapnel or bullets in their bodies never had shrapnel or bullets in their bodies. And how you can just bold-facedly do that is staggering. And it would have been more staggering if I didn't know that they did the same thing to John Kennedy and Martin Luther King and Robert King. It's just something they do. And they get away with it. And they get away with it a lot easier for people like us. So, again, thank you. Now, let's just go through some of the things that they've done. When Pearl Harbor happened, the United States government refused to report on specifics. The fleet was attacked. Shipping was damaged. American sailors were killed. It's a day in infamy of declaring war on Japan. And even though there were all Japanese planes flying over Pearl Harbor, one good declaration deserves another. They declared war on Germany at the same time, which is just an obscenity. I never saw Germany and the Nazis as a threat to Rhode Island or anything like that. But it happened. And who got rich out of that deal? Defense contractors. The Depression ended with the arrival of Japanese airplanes in Hawaii. In World War II, for many years, when I taught history, the casualty count for Americans in World War II was 312,000. And it was a standard number, and every 5 years when I got a new edition of a textbook, 312,000. Now, the number is over 400,000. And it's not as if those 88,000 plus additional died in 1999 as a result of wounds in 1944, 55 years earlier. The truth conquered the small version of the story. And even then, it was idiotic to even go that way. There's 312,000 killed, which is 312,000 too many, make no mistake. That represents, we were in the war for 3.5 years. 312,000 killed represented 16 days worth of casualties in Russia. From the time Operation Barbarossa started, when the Nazis invaded Russia, until the day the Nazis surrendered, the Russians lost 19,187 people every day. So we kept the number to 312,000 to make it comfortable. But it was not. Look at the slaughter going on over there. And some of the slaughter that was going on in the Pacific. In World War I, the armistice was signed so that the fighting would end on November 11th, which is 11/11, at 11 o'clock. Well, they were shooting each other and killing each other until 10:59. The last Americans killed were killed in order to conquer a city where there were supposedly bathing facilities. And just to show you how things work, the guys that were killed on November 11th were dated as killed in action on November 10th to make sure that they didn't lose whatever benefits were coming. Nobody died on 11/11, but they did. Later on, World War II, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What do you see on the History Channel? We know about the History Channel. You see a plane flying over the Enola Gay, supposedly. Of course, you never saw the small print underneath there. It says Enola Gay in big letters, and underneath it says, "Don't ask, don't tell." Then you see a flash, the bomb, and then you see a wasteland. And that was Hiroshima. And there's one building with a domed roof, the steel substructure survived, and that was it. 50,000 people died. And now the textbooks talk about 200,000 people killed in Hiroshima, and 200,000 killed in Nagasaki. So in about 4 minutes, we killed as many Japanese as we lost in all of World War II. Not that it's upsetting, because after all, they did visit Pearl Harbor. But the reality of what happened is a lot different than the plane, the flash, and the empty landscape. I've seen the videos from Hiroshima. When you see children running down the street with their skin coming off them like a piece of cheese, you understand what happened. It's hard. It's just the children. It's just horrible. After World War II, you could have easily picked up a newspaper with the headline, "Ex-Nazis form the CIA," because we grabbed up the Gehlen network in Germany. They had all the spies inside of Russia. That's what we needed. Don't give the Gehlen network any problems. You won't see any of them at Nuremberg. It would have been a tremendous story if they confused the two groups. Took all the guys from Nuremberg, Goring, Keitel, Jodl, brought them to America to run the CIA and hang Gehlen and his crew. It didn't happen. And Gehlen and his crew were not the friendliest people that we needed. And we will go to whomever we need when we need it. If we're going to kill Castro, who cares about organized crime? Still get this out there. And just as the headline could have been ex-Nazis form the CIA, there could have been a headline on November 25th, 1963 saying, "FBI informant kills FBI informant." Ruby Oswald. There it is. You'll see that headline on the news. Not even when history becomes real. In the 1950s, you had McCarthyism, which, for those that never studied the Salem witch trials, it was the same stuff revisited. Same exact thing. All that mattered was the accusation. And if you could provide names, you were off the hook. If you couldn't, you were on the hook. And Joe McCarthy stood there, and the American people ate it up. And he said, "In my pocket, I have a list of 208 names of commies someplace, in the Boy Scouts or State Department, whoever. And in my pocket, I have a list of the people at COPA tonight. But unlike McCarthy, I'll share it with you. Pick up your dry cleaning on Monday." Wrong list. It was horrible. It was a license to steal. Governments had it before. They got it now. They had it in 1963. And after McCarthyism, you get the bomber gap, the missile gap. Who benefits from that? Same people who benefited from Pearl Harbor, same people who benefited from Vietnam, same people who benefited from Iraq's horrific takeover of Kuwait. Same people who are benefiting today. The bomber gap and the missile gap both became jokes, and the truth came out. On May Day, 1960, when the story was really going around about Francis Gary Powers, American observers who were in the Kremlin in Red Square, wonderful place that I visited, saw the rockets going through the streets and tanks, the typical May Day parade when it was rocket rattling. And they also saw a flight of Bison and Bear bombers. They were the biggest weapons delivery airplanes at the time. And I said, oh my God, look at this thing. This is a threat. I counted them, and 24. And one of the planes was numbered 488. The average person's going to look at that and figure, well, there's probably 487 others, which is not a good thing. There's 24 planes then landed at the Vnukovo airport, and the 488, by removing a little strip of decal, became 483. And those 24 planes, with numbers slightly changed, flew over again. Then 483 became 433, and 433 became 133. This is a little bit duct tape. Then it became 13, 433. And then it became one digit. So those 24 planes flew over Red Square 6, 7, 8 times, and the Russians suddenly had 200 or 300 heavy bombers. We've got to catch up to those. And the truth was they had 24. And satellite photos reveal that. Not too far before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that's why folks like Curtis LeMay wanted to go in and get it done, because they knew the Russians didn't have what they needed to really fight a nuclear war. The Russian missiles at that time were liquid fueled. It took them hours to get the things ready. By the time we attacked them, there'd be a guy standing there with like a gasoline hose, evaporated. And how did we know? How did we know the Russians were or weren't going to attack us? Because they had the fuel all the missiles and get the bombers ready. How did we know? We had strategically placed spies in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, watching day and night. We call the Death Watch. The Hermitage Museum, which is one of the most famous art museums in the world. And these guys are told if 100 trucks ever show up, take all the good paintings out and put them in an underground cave somewhere 400 feet down, it's going to be a nuclear war. If the paintings aren't moved, the sun's going to shine tomorrow. That was the strategy. And if you're dealing with that kind of strategy, you can understand why the pictures of Lee Oswald at the Soviet and Mexican consulates are pictures of other people. And they're probably people who were supposed to be moving paintings in Russia. It's just a crazy, crazy situation, but it happened. Eisenhower, in his farewell address, I know everybody here has seen it, because it's in the beginning of the movie JFK, and he talks about the military-industrial complex. What did he want to say originally in his speech? His speech originally said military-industrial congressional complex. Congressional got cut out because you can identify those folks. Their names are on the ballots in the election machine. The military-industrial, who are they? Boeing aircraft? You know who that is. It's a thing, not a person. Congressional are people. So they got cut out. And he wasn't lying. I'll be a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. Kennedy became president. He understood the reality of what the situation was. He looked at what Cuban Missile Crisis could have been. He lost his son. And we just said, oh, death is too painful. For too many. For too long. You got to work at the alternative to war. Peace is good for business, folks. It's a disaster. If peace ever breaks out, we're in trouble. He wanted a test ban. And I think most of you know the story. He was with his science advisor one day in the Oval Office, looking out, and the rain's coming down. He's asking about nuclear testing, and the science advisor, Jerome Wiesner, says to him, there's fallout in that rain you're looking at. Okay, are you kidding me? No, it goes into the, washes into the ground, the grass grows up, the cows eat it, and the milk's radioactive. You can't do that. Our children. Peace almost broke out. We were going to share the space program. It's a horrible idea because we were spending a fortune. The biggest single boondoggle in the history of America is the U.S. space program. Because when Sputnik was launched, no effort was spared. Whatever it cost, fix it, make it work. And new research into what the financial scams were to get stuff done. It's unbelievable. But they got away with it. National security. They got to catch the missile gap. Sputnik. Kennedy was looking at limited disarmament. You know the Russians didn't have enough bombs and missiles and planes to be any kind of threat, so why do we need 10 times as many? Call to roll. That can happen. And when he spoke at American University on June 10th, he signed his death warrant. And the punctuation on that document was said the next day in a radio address in which he told the United States that there was going to be civil rights legislation introduced into Congress. An awful lot of people didn't want to see civil rights legislation. You had to be alive in 1963 to understand the difference between then and now. Jackie Robinson might have been the first black guy to play professional baseball. He wasn't actually. Of course, when we think about it, he didn't stay in a hotel with the rest of the team. Civil rights. In this last election, people talked a great deal about small government. I'm all for it. Great idea. Start with the Pentagon. No, you can't do that, because national security. You've got to protect these people. And my question is, from whom? The Russians won't belly up. The Chinese are making so much money off us, they'd never attack us. So where's the threat? There isn't any. And to this day, and I'm sure nobody knows this better than John Judd, because I know he lives near the Pentagon and he probably gets stuck in there. Got off the traffic in the morning and the afternoon. The Pentagon employs more people than the population of 17 member nations of the United Nations. That's unthinkable. There it is. It's your taxes. And every penny you pay in federal income tax in your entire life, they will spend in an hour in some boondoggle. National security. After the American University speech, the Civil Rights speech, after Kennedy lost his son, and when it looked like Lyndon Johnson was going to take the fall for an awful lot of scandals, Kennedy went to Texas and came home with a body. And things were just never the same after that. And I think that's a quote from JFK, but it's a quote from me. And things were just never the same. There was no investigation because shortly after dark, the FBI told the Dallas police we're taking the evidence. And they didn't just take the rifle, they took everything they could get their hands on. And it made a one-way trip to Washington. The rifle only came back because they needed to put fingerprints on it at the funeral home. But the FBI stole the case and concluded it almost immediately. Oswald did it in the story. He was crazy nut. He wanted to become famous. If he wanted to become famous, you think he would have said, I did it. The president needed to be killed because all the stories I heard said Oswald liked Kennedy. Well, believe who you will. There was no investigation. What did you get? The Warren Commission. The Warren Commission. They had no investigators. The FBI covered up. Admittedly, years later, they covered up, which we know, the transfer of agents. God knows what else. They promised, and recently I read in the depositions, particularly J. Lee Rankin and Nicholas Katzenbach. The most important thing was that we get all the facts out. That's what mattered. Forget anything else. We got to get all the facts out. On the first day the Warren Commission heard a witness, Warren told the press, there's stuff that will not be known in your lifetime. And so far, he's right. Think about the Warren Commission for a minute. Imagine you're in a situation where you're given the opportunity to stock a new NFL franchise somewhere. Owns Montana, who cares? Even if you're Jerry Jones, who knows nothing about professional football, you're not just going to say, well, look, give me 25 fat guys and we'll start from there. Look, you're going to want a bunch of specialists. You're going to need a handful of fat guys. You're going to need somebody who can punt, who can kick field goals, who can run back kickoff. You're going to need somebody who makes that long hike for the punts correct every time. You're going to be in trouble. You need any number of specialists, cover corners, strong safety, weak side safety. Now, who was the Warren Commission? Earl Warren. And as a Supreme Court Justice, he could literally have the power to block any legislation or any court decision that came down. He was the get out of jail free card. McCloy, he was the specialist in the moneyed interest in the world. Jerry Ford got a sprinter's badge from running for the FBI with everything that the Warren Commission said in executive session. Alan Dulles, you don't even have to explain him. Richard Russell was the Senate, the liaison from the United States Senate for the Armed Services Committee and the CIA, and the Intelligence Service. He was an insider. Well, then you work your way down to Hale Boggs. And you can say, well, they had to have one alcoholic. God knows when people read the Warren Report, there was going to be a lot more alcoholics in the United States. But think about where Hal Boggs was from, Louisiana. The one place in the United States where there would subsequently be charges brought against an individual in the murder of John Kennedy. Hal Boggs was there for a reason. And finally, you got John Sherman Cooper, harmless guy, who was part of the Georgetown crowd, and he was reasonably close to JFK. So if anybody said, wait a minute, look who's on the commission, so Cooper, he's close to Kennedy. And he was closer than you think, because he and Kennedy joke that they were related by marriage. Because Cooper's wife had been married to a man who subsequently married John Kennedy's first wife. So when Joe Kennedy got annulled real quickly. These two guys, not in front of Jackie, they didn't. They used to kid, they were related by marriage. That was an absolute dream team. Absolute dream team. But their conclusions were written before they ever sat down at the photograph table. And everything that's happened since then has happened not for us, but because of us. The Clark panel, that was a knee-jerk reaction to Clay Shaw being arrested. And they had the temerity to move the autopsy wounds 4 inches in different directions, but never the courage to say the autopsy doctors were wrong. It's just that the wounds were put in the wrong place. No matter what Humes had to say about it, he was overruled. The House Select Committee, same thing. It was a knee-jerk reaction to when Robert Gordon and Dick Gregory showed the Zapruder film on television. And when America saw Kennedy's head go backwards in that shot, something had to be done. So they come out with probable conspiracy, which is kind of like almost being pregnant. It's an answer, but it's no answer. And believe me, the House Select Committee got a lot closer to the Truth and War Commission ever did, but they never had the courage to ask tough questions. They had people call in and let them go. They had a lot of people call in. Humes sat in front of the House Select Medical Panel. I was right about the wounds. I know what I saw. Don't tell me otherwise. They put them on TV and sold out. Yeah, I was wrong. You guys are right. And if there's one little stack of testimony that you need to read, and it's in the chronology in an appendix, it's the House Select Medical Panel taking Humes apart. Because everybody on that panel had a different idea of where the wound was in front of President Kennedy's head. Not the entrance, the exit. There's not a place on his head where that bullet didn't come out. Or those bullets. There it is. The review board. Well, they did open the files. Yeah, that was a knee-jerk reaction to Oliver Stone's movie, and the files they opened were some wonderfully redacted documents that say blank on a certain date, blank contacted blank in order to blank. Take that to the grand jury. I will say this, and it bears reading if you can get your hands on it. They're also in the chronology. The depositions that the review board took from medical people are, to my opinion, the finest piece of deposition work at any time in the Kennedy case, anywhere. When you read the Warren Commission, you're reading a script, and it's almost as if the stuff was printed before those questions were asked. They knew what they were going to say, they knew what they wanted the guy to answer, go with it. And I can't recall 5 instances in the Warren Commission. Somebody said, "Could you repeat the question?" I'm sorry, I don't understand quite what you're trying to say. It happened again and again with the review board. And Jeremy Gunn, he just said, "Would you repeat the question?" "Sure, okay. Here's what I want you to, what I'm trying to get from you." And he rephrased it in lay terms, and it was manageable. And if you're reading the Warren Commission, garbage. And you read Jeremy Gunn, it's like, breath of fresh air. And there's an awful lot of controversies that come out of that. And when you see them, you understand why we don't know the stuff we don't know yet. So you had 4 investigations, all of which were reactions to us. Nothing ever towards finding the truth. The autopsy photos, well, everybody's seen them. They were released by the government. They're out there because one Secret Service man took a set of them out of the NPIC in 1963 and transferred ownership to a disc jockey in Delaware. He gave them to Lifton, he gave them to Harry Livingstone. He sold them negatives to me, so you can see the autopsy. I've never seen the photographs of the brain. Because they're not in the set of pictures I have. And I could break down the archive door all day long, and I can walk in and look at stuff that I have no business seeing. It's 47 years later. Carolyn Kennedy is almost 60. As far as those types of pictures are not published their name yet. I don't think they ever will be. And if that's not crazy enough, they took a medical illustrator who made exact copies of the photograph by the House Law Committee. Lifton put them in his book. You don't need the photographs when you got exact illustrated copies. It's different things. It's still a president. There's still a big coming out over here. But they never released the photos. Life magazine paid $150,000 for the Cooper film and never showed it. The most expensive to that day piece of news ever acquired and never used. After Kennedy, of course, Vietnam, the Gulf of Tonkin Revolution. 2 PT boats take on 2 destroyers. It's like 2 midgets attacking a pro football team. And then the National Football League passing a rule that the football team can beat up on the midgets. Absurd. And by the way, there's a new LBJ book. LBJ, Mastermind of the Kennedy Assassination. And if you don't like Johnson, everything bad ever said about LBJ is in there. And you put that thing down, you think LBJ should have gone to jail for 5 lifetimes. The body counts for example. The My Lai massacre and that kind of thing. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. Again, I'm old enough. It just came up on the screen. I'm old enough to remember the night Lyndon Johnson abdicated. Sunday night, March 31st, 1968. And I will not accept my party's nomination for president if they were going to give it to him. Looking back now, I see Lyndon Johnson's 2 biggest enemies at that point in time was Martin Luther King, because Lyndon Johnson could never adequately satisfy his Southern base of support, and the civil rights movement, and Bobby Kennedy, who had literally undone LBJ. Gene McCarthy was a good stalking horse and a good spellman. Bobby Kennedy was going to be nominated. And who were the 2 guys that died within 2 months of LBJ abdicating? Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. What happened with them? Martin Luther King never really had an autopsy. And the guy who didn't autopsy him was called to not autopsy Bobby Kennedy in Los Angeles. Noguchi wound up doing it. They called the guy from Memphis. Pierre Fink, from Kennedy's autopsy, showed up at Bobby Kennedy's autopsy. Chances of something like that happening was slim and none. And Fink didn't know the first thing about autopsy. When you read his deposition, he couldn't tell the difference between the chin and the knee. But he was the expert. He's the expert. He was the other 2. Those who were in white outfits, they should have been selling good humor. Although they report is good humor if it wasn't so tragic. Boswell. When Fink testified, and you've seen this in the movie JFK, Fink testified in New Orleans and said, a general was in charge there. They had to rush Morton Boswell to New Orleans to bail Fink out. And it's a crazy story. Even as Boswell tells it, it's a crazy story. He got to his room, which was paid for by the U.S. Justice Department in his state prosecution. There was notes there, call so-and-so. He meets some attorneys whose names he could not recall in some sleazy back alley. They prepped him in case they needed him the next day. He goes down to breakfast the next day, and there's Fink and his wife. And they look at each other, hi, howdy do. Nobody asks, what are you doing here? And they didn't call Boswell as a witness, but they did say to him, you were there? And he said, yes, I was there, and the government won its case. Jeremy Gunn said to Boswell, the government in the case, sir, was Jim Garrison, and he didn't win this case. And Boswell, serious television. When Martin Luther King was shot, but still alive, the Justice Department called J. Thornton Boswell and told him get to Memphis now because we want to be able to say we did everything we could, quote, save the revenue. By the time he got his socks packed, the king was dead. After that, we've got Watergate, the October surprise, and I'm hurrying here, weapons of mass destruction, U.S. interventions in all kinds of strange places, Desert Storm 1, Desert Storm 2, one good Desert Storm deserves another, 9/11, which again boosted the defense industry like you can't imagine. Little known fact, there was a committee in Washington because, after all, 19 Saudis hijacked the airplanes and we declared war in Iraq. So there's a committee now, and they're studying, it's a think tank kind of thing, they're studying all kinds of possibilities. You know, for instance, if we were attacked, if planes are subsequently hijacked by guys from Iceland, they're currently making a decision as to whether we should go to war against Peru, Nigeria, or Thailand. Typical. And all that stuff is nothing but government frauds, from the top to the bottom. The current economic crisis. The President of the United States today is getting blamed for it, but the stock market crashed and somebody else is president. And when the stock market crashes, this is usually a hangover for a while. It's not like it rebounds the next day. Today's elections aren't about people. They're about political parties controlling money. Ask yourself, did Kennedy look at what was in Vietnam? Did Kennedy have ever been accused of something like Watergate? The October surprise? Desert Storm? Not a chance. The bottom line, the second perspective, you want green converts. Don't come out screaming like a conspiracy theorist. I'm supposed to generally story. In the story, this is your government, your taxes, your life. If, however, you decide, and each of us has our own understanding who would want to be. And I doubt that any three people in that room tonight would do the same thing. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. Well, it's understandable because there's so many possibles. Who, what, we know when, why. There's so many possibilities. But if you're in a gathering and somebody says, hey, you still working on the JFK stuff? Yeah. Because it's important. Why is it important? I don't know the truth. You know, what's the story? Well, the story really is that the driver of the car turned around and shot him. And then on the airplane, they stole the body, medically altered it, took the bullets out, the throat, but I was altered. You may believe that. And if you do, God bless. I don't think you're going to sell for the American public anymore. I'm not convinced they're interested in that. Simply because they're too scared. Okay, I'd be happy to take questions. The phone's going to ring. I'll repeat the question, and I'll give you my take. But understand this is my take. So please. And if you can, identify yourself so I know who I'm talking to. Hello? Yeah. Okay, let me talk to the screen now for a second. Hold on. Question was that I read Nelson's book on JFK Mastermind, LBJ Mastermind. Number one, I haven't finished it. As far as I've gotten, which is about halfway, I think it makes a very solid case, not just for Dealey Plaza, but for just for LBJ being a gangster from the time he was 12 years old and told his friends in school he was going to be president. And the ultimate question you got to ask yourself is why? A lot of people considered LBJ president of the United States under Eisenhower, and he was Senate Majority Leader. Why would he go from that job to the vice presidency? Absolutely empty. Unless he thought he was going to climb the ladder. The only qualm I have about the book to this point, and as I said, I'm about halfway through. The only qualm I have is too many places. He gives you a little hint of something, and he says, and we'll explore that in further chapters. Hey, he says, don't say it. Wait till it happens. This is too much foreshadowing, but it's absolutely worth a read. I'm really enjoying it, and at this point, I can't say I enjoyed that many new books. So I hope that answers your question, Bob. Hello? Hello? Sure. Okay, I got a couple things I just want to close with, okay? Alright. Okay, we'll do. Okay, couple last things, folks. As I said, as far as the chronology goes, the copyright is going to be a little different than what you usually anticipate. John has my contact information, and if you want my phone number, John, give it to him. I get calls, JFK calls all the time, one or two more, it's not going to make a difference. My deepest thanks again to John, to COPA, and to you, all of you, for being there and for caring. And I'll leave you with this. Last year, and in recent years, I stressed the work I was doing in learning Russian. Next year, when I'm there with you in Dallas, I'm going to tell you how easy it is to forget Russian. Good night. God bless.